Hi friends, welcome to Medium Unlimited here on my YouTube channel at Cyn Lagos. I'm Cyn Lagos. Hello, if you don't know me and my work, hello, I'd love to get to know you. So drop in the chat, say hello. Let's get to know each other's work because I know we all work really hard for it, especially if you're artistic. It's a personal expression. It's a personal story you want to tell. Sometimes you're just playing with your creative tools, right? There's always that. So folks, I focus on mentoring artists, the next generation of amazing artists in the spaces of photography, video, and also design. So here we explore design and photography. So today I will be exploring a recent portrait that I took, and I want to see, kind of mitigate my workflow when it comes to selecting that hero shot from a various selections of photos, and also how I would go about exploring the photo in post-editing when it comes to Lightroom, but also maybe we can think about our options in spaces like Photoshop, because Photoshop and Lightroom are wonderful at communicating with each other. And this is a workflow that I often use as well. So I welcome you to open up your programs if you want to follow alongside. If you just want to listen to this, then, tune in, enjoy it, and let's get to know each other a little bit better. Okay. All right. All right, folks. So this is my website. I love welcoming you into my website with already a gift, because you got to give in order to receive. And in this space, I made it available so that you can join my Skillshare class at a special 1-month trial for free, I believe. So check that out, and hopefully you can enjoy how much variety there is in my own lessons in Skillshare. There's 3 different lessons and 3 different categories. So hopefully you enjoy that. This is my website, folks. I love sharing my work on here and keeping up with the latest live streams and schedules that I'm working on. So if you're invited, you're specially VIP invited to peruse through my website to get to know it intimately, because this space is catered to you, right? I want you to learn about my journey, hopefully, so that inspires your own. If you go under these sections here, you can find the Medium Unlimited stream, and you can find any of the previous streams that we've had. And we've explored some really cool stuff here. On Mondays, we explore motion. So let's go back up here. We explore motion on Adobe Live. And the last one was this one, Color Secrets. I worked hard on this one, and I really enjoyed the process because it's a learning experience. Sometimes to dive into different tools and in a new craft, right? So, and we also have photo design stuff here. So yeah, get to know it, folks. I love to connect more on that front. Okay, so let's dive into Lightroom here. Let's jump right in. So I'm in Adobe Lightroom. Dive into this here. Okay. So I'm in Adobe Lightroom, and this is the cloud version, right? Ooh. Okay, so I'm checking on y'all on Behance and on YouTube on the chat. So drop in and let me know if you have any questions along the way. I'd love to hear from you. That'd be awesome. Okay, so here we are, and I want to share with you what happened here. So my journey went a little bit like this. I attended a wonderful photo walk this weekend, and among the walk, I will be talking about this photo walk quite a bit. So get ready, because there were so many cool shots that I got from this. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see some of these. I absolutely felt like there was just so much to photograph and so many cool people to photograph on this photo shoot. So gosh, if there's a photo walk near you, you gotta go. I went to this literally on my own and met so many cool people in a matter of hours. And I met Emily here, also a photographer, super cool gal. You can see her here ready with her film camera and also her digital camera. Smart gal, I tell you. So we had this photo walk in a neighborhood here in Austin, and I noticed this sign right here. It says nice. And I just love that beneath it is all of this tagged up graffiti, which is absolutely, the example of rebellion and not nice, right? Well, it's just another form of art in reality. But I just thought it was nice and textury and grungy, maybe. The brick on the wall is also exceptional. So the reason why I show you this photo is just because I was testing in that moment, asking myself, how can I take this photo? So I grabbed Emily here and we started playing and trying to see what kind of shots. I immediately took her picture just in case there was a possibility of trying a different composition before she's ready for me and she's waiting for me, essentially. So I try to take a couple photos just to make sure I'm on tune with my lighting. I think when you're photographing other people, that's always really important for you to sort out. So I wanted to be able to kind of discern that before she got ready. And there she's comfortable. She's sort of enjoying a moment, just kind of resting. I know we were all walking a lot. So we were kind of playing around, and I know she was patient with me. She's also a photographer. But in moments like this, what I recommend is that you have an idea of what you want to do. I know I wanted to incorporate the sign nice. And in this case, I was struggling a little bit because I know I can get an image that is forward like this one, and that's a photo and that will be just fine. But I don't get the symbol of the word nice. If I get it this way, then I miss out on all of this horizontal space. And sure, I can generate it in post, but if I don't want to do that, or if I don't want to introduce that as a generation, maybe I want to introduce other elements, but not particularly my background, I need to use a horizontal ratio. So that's what I was meddling with in my head. I'm like, okay, I need a horizontal ratio for this, but I also need to introduce the logo. Vertical, I get that typography logo. Horizontal, I don't. So then I found myself doing this, shooting it from below. I'm going to go here, shooting it from below and getting a completely different look altogether. And here I started getting really excited because I can see that not only was I getting the shot that I wanted, including the logo right here with the word nice as a symbol. I love that she was wearing kind of clothes that went with the color palette here. She has the blue jeans, the blue sky. She has the red edges here. And I've got the red logo. So color palette wise, everything was working. Texture, there's so much texture. Her vibe is saying, yes, this wall is my cup of tea. And I love the juxtaposition of her rock and roll kind of vibe versus the word nice. So that's the way I'm often thinking through all of these, right? I found myself considering all of these options and seeing and weighing those options as I choose my hero image. So that's my train of thought as I consider this. And this is important because when you are in a space where you're shooting sort of on the go and it's happening all very fast, you definitely want to have an idea in mind. And you definitely want to have parameters set in place that you can always go back to, right? So for me, those parameters could be something like knowing things like geometry. I want geometry in my photo. I want texture in my photo. I want to see if there's any room for symbols that I can play around in post. I rather enjoy the post-production process, so it makes complete sense. So let's jump into Lightroom and start editing this photo and approach it from a technical standpoint, and then approach it from a stylistic, more storytelling standpoint, and see where we can go from there. Okay, so let's go here, and I won't discard these altogether. Like, I'm still going to use them. What's really cool is that out of these, I can get one as well from this batch. From this horizontal batch, I can get one as well. And I start kind of narrowing my options from 1, 2, and 3. I can argue that in number 3, her hair was glowing, not glowing, but her heart here was glowing, her hair was moving. So there's a little bit of action happening. I get a little bit of the same in this one, but is her gesture a little bit better? It's a little bit more 45-degree angle. This one, I don't know. It's between these two. This one seems more like she's staring down the barrel of the lens, even if I don't see her eyes too discernibly because of her glasses. So lots to think about there. Definitely hero shots in every batch. I think from here, this one's no more because it doesn't have that hair strand, but these two are promising. This one, I feel like her chin, her facing away from us, felt a little bit, I don't know, it gives off something else. This feels more powerful because she's staring forward and with a lot of intention. So I'm going to pick this one out of this batch, which means I can start with 5 stars down here. Or I can also select it using this little check mark right here. So I flagged this as a pick. I'm also going to flag one of these as a pick. Let's see what we've got here. I'm going to flag one of these probably. I edited this one kind of in a hurly kind of way. Gosh, that's probably not it. But this one, this batch right here, I love that she's looking past, kind of careless. And my angle's not quite as low, but this one is. So I'll put that as 5, select. And of course, I think this is my main pick because she's staring at the camera. So I'll just go back on my versions and pick the original so we can work on that one as well. What do you think? I think that's a good pick. So we'll pick that one as well. And then from these 3 batches right here, I don't think I like any of these. She wasn't quite ready. I wasn't quite ready. So I think our vertical versions, they definitely have some potential. I like this one. I like this one. That one's my pick. Pick a star. All right. So I'm doing good here. I'm enjoying these 3 selections so far. 4 selections I think we have. And we can get started at technically fixing some of these in post edits. So what we can do from here is go into this little button right here. Maybe you see it, maybe you don't. It's right next to the search. Let's see if we can give you a better view here. So we have this little section right here, and it's going to give us a search engine. So I'm going to get down here so you can see. It's going to give us a search engine. Do you see this here? All right, cool. I want you to create some filters so that you can go from there. So what we're going to do, since we've already started and selected it, we're going to say we only want the 5-star options, just the 5-star options, hotels, cars, the works. All right. We really just want the ones that we selected, essentially. We want only the 5 stars and the ones that are picked. So you can start to think, okay, I want to tag these as 5 stars if they're meant to go for the client, 4 stars if they're meant to be maybe going online. I don't know. You can start creating categories per starting rating, and maybe that can help you filter out different scenarios for your photos. So whether they're going to be published online, whether they're going to be sent to the person. I mean, there's just so many different subcategories you can create in the star system. So now I've got only the ones that I've selected, which seems to be only the 4. So let's go back here and get into the editing process. Let's start with this vertical one. Actually, let's start with the horizontal one. Okay. All right. So drop in on the chat. I'm curious to learn, where are you joining me from? If you're watching here live, if you're a photographer, what is the latest photo that you took? What is the latest photo that you took? Was it a photo of yourself? Was it a photo of the inside of your home? Was it a photo of your pet? I want to know, what is the last photo that you took? I'm intrigued to learn how you took it too. Did you use your phone? Did you use your camera? When was the last time you used a camera? That's a good question to ask yourself every single time. That's always a good question, right? So, all right, let's jump on this and continue the editing process. Let's jump in right away. I want to correct something that has been bugging me, and it's the optics. So I'm right here on the right hand side. I'm going to find optics, and I'm going to go into remove those chromatic aberrations any time of the day. Sure, why not? And most of all, change the profile. Because I was using a 24:1:5, you can also auto select here, but it looks like unable to locate profile. Okay, gotcha. It's okay. I'll help you if you can't locate it. So I had a Canon lens, but I did not have this one. I had, from here we had a 24 Canon EF. Where are you? Here you go. No, that's not the one. It's close though. It's very close. Let's check it out. Let's take a look at the information here. So it looks like I did in fact shoot it at a 24mm focal length. That's why that worked. But I in fact had a 24:1:5 lens on this. But I was shooting at a 24 range. So it was able to denote that here in the info, focal length. Cool. That's informative for me to then change my profile, because I can go here and go into the Canon profiles. I guess I already put it. Did I already put it in? Enable profile. There you are. All right. So we're going to enable 24mm on a Canon, which was 16-24 1.8. That's a macro lens. 24-70. That looks about right. Mine was a 24-70, in fact. If it doesn't look quite right, that's all right. there is still options. So under some things have definitely changed here. All right. So if you want to continue to play with the distortion, is what I wanted to say, we're going to be moving this manually. And that's going to remove that warp distortion that happens to zoom lenses. And we're also going to kind of increase and decrease that vignetting that also happens to zoom lenses. So that's the first step I wanted to take there. Then I'm going to go into the cropping system because I know I have it set up as a 16:9 ratio. And that often works for me. For most things that I like to do, it's definitely a ratio I really enjoy. I think more is more, in my opinion. So things like a panoramic ratio to me seems really, really cool. I wish those were explored in here. I want to make sure she's somewhat in the center. So if I do have to forgo some of that backdrop, that might be just fine in the quest of making sure she is very much in the center. She's pulling all of that attention. Her eyes are down the barrel of the lens. It's perfect. I am loving this so much so far. So that is just from doing some technical edits. And as such, we're going to actually do a better workflow here. We were here. We went from that to this, to this. So a correct workflow for you to experiment is always going to lie in exploring different facets of your workflow. So facet number one for me is going to be creating a version called tech. So order of operations, essentially, of your workflow. It's going to help you understand better what process you enjoy the most. So tech phase one. So I'll call it phase one tech. That's really what I wanted to write. So technical specs, right? That's kind of how it is. Oops, why did I undo that? Phase one. So that is just the technical specs. So correcting the ratio, the horizontal line, making sure there's not too much warping of or vignetting coming from the camera lens, making sure that is compatible. So doing that little bit of post editing, not only is it helpful, but it's almost necessary when it comes to extending the quality that your camera can provide, the quality of photograph that your camera can provide. So helping it in the post editing process to get just right is ideal, because cameras are cameras. They're not made perfect. They come with a lot of imperfections, some of which we embrace, like grain, light leaks, all the works, like things like that we embrace on purpose. And I welcome you to lean into that too. But definitely, if you want to correct something and make it as close to the ideal image that you had in your mind, this is one of the steps that I think are important. We have Hans Jorg from Switzerland. Hey, this is super cool. I love seeing people from all over the world. Do you go by Hans, by the way? I just went for a nickname there. Hope that's okay. All right. And then we also have Evelina from Russia. That's so awesome. Awesome, Hans. All right, cool. I go by Cyn. My long name is Cynthia. So for those of folks who are wondering, what is Cyn? So this is where we're at in our photo process. We've just corrected the text specs. So let's get back here and continue the next order of operations. So for me, it's going to often be sort of like you put your hand in the air and you get a feeling of, this photo needs this photo needs that. So the next order of operations is often the light. So what kind of light quality did I obtain from this image. So currently the light is actually really yellowish, and maybe that's fine. Maybe that's a little bit of yellow tint can give an image a very nostalgic quality. That might be exactly what I'm looking for. Or I can continue to correct, and I often do that by going into the curves. So you can see here on the curves, we are playing with different tonalities of light. So I can go in here with the target adjustment tool, and it's going to target in my line curves just the highlights and the shadows and the midtones in here. I'm not targeting anything else. Really interesting to target your lights directly from here to see what kind of quality of light you can achieve. Maybe there's a little bit more information if I bring it down. Maybe there's more information if I take it up. I often try to shoot directly in the best light possible, which is why you saw that black and white photo earlier. That black and white photo is what I see in my viewfinder, and that's really important for me to hit that histogram color just exact. So I don't often have to reduce my color too much because of that methodology that I use in photographing my images. But I do like bringing it down just a tad bit, and it gives it a little bit more of that quality. The shadows are stronger, they're a little bit more powerful. I also recommend going into the parametric equalizer. Parametric equalizers from Premiere. Y'all, I'm always mixing my mediums here. This little button right here, cool, there you go. So this little button right here is a different type of curve. Let me see. If I go, yes, it's the parametric curve. So on Premiere, we've got the parametric equalizer for audio. On Lightroom, we've got the parametric curve. So what's interesting about this one is that it acts a little bit more subtly to your image. Look at how that impacts the highlights and my shadows. Totally different. Did you notice that? Okay, I'm gonna do this a little bit extreme just to show you how it pulls on those highlights in a way that makes it completely a different image. So you see this before? Right? It's interesting to me to use this versus your regular light balance curve. It gives you a different result. Trust me on this, it's gonna give you a different result. And I wanted to create a bit of a faded look because there is going to be a lot of contrast in my color choices. So if you don't put light contrast, consider color contrast, and that could be really cool. So I would love to hear from the chat. What is the last photo that you photographed? Was it of your friend, your furry friend? Was it a location? Are you architectural based? The latest photos that I took were portrait, and I don't often get that opportunity, but I do from time to time when I get a chance to get to know the people around me and participate in things like this, like photo walks. I love hosting photo walks as well. And so I love to get your interest in that if that's something you're into, because it's so much fun. We're all kind of like-minded individuals, and it becomes like just an easy flow of energy. So let's add a little bit of color. So that's just the light, folks. That's just the lights using the curves and the target adjustment curve tool within the lights, right? So target adjustment curve tool is really special because you can directly impact the image as you step into certain areas. So certain pixels are being picked up. Maybe you're picking up your midtones. That is what's going to be targeted. So I'm undoing that because I do like it as is. So step number 2, that was my lights. I might jump between those steps, right? So it's going to blend in and merge at some point. But we're going to challenge ourselves to stay in our compartmentalized order of operations and see how it goes, right? All right, phase 2, light. So if you're not familiar with this, I'm using the versions tool in Adobe Lightroom Cloud base, and that's going to enable you to do these steps where you're working from your original. Phase 1, I corrected the text specs. Phase 2, I corrected the light. So I'm saving each category of my workflow, and I have the chance then to step back and experiment some more. And I'll show you how that works later as we step more into the stylistic side, which is the colors in the shadows and the highlights and the midtones, stylistic decisions to move the story forward sometimes, or sometimes just to appeal to the eye. So let's enter that phase because we're about to, right? So let's go into the color, which, by the way, you're not supposed to create a new version. You can create it in post having made those changes. Just make sure to do it before you move on to another section. Okay, let's go into color here, and I'm going to experiment with different options. I want to first try out the color via the curve panel and all of the different channels that we have here available to us. Okay, so these are really cool because if we play around with these curves, we start to get some really interesting results when it comes to contrast. This starts to look really cool and intriguing because it's completely different. Also, some of these outputs, I argue, come out of the film cameras. These purple shadows, these different color highlights that they're not resting on neutral. They are resting on a color from the RGB mode. They're resting in red. So you can just sort of mimic some of those palettes, but the goal is going to be to be subtle in these steps. Don't overdo it, right? You go from this neutral to maybe around there, right? And that's already a color. You can go from here to maybe something grimy and grungy like this, right? Very desaturated, kind of cool. You can pull this, and this is going to affect the highlights. That's only the highlights. Do you notice that? Pay attention to this. When you go in here, you're looking at these white tiles, right? Those are representative of our highlights. When you're looking at this, in between, those are shadows, midtones, sometimes absolute blacks. Those live down here in the graph. Midtones, and then we have our highlights and our absolute whites. Watch what happens when I move my absolute whites. Do you see that? That is mostly affecting the inside of the tiles, right? And the same goes for moving it towards purple, towards green. I'm affecting mostly the highlights. And the highlights that exist, oops, I'm sorry for that. The highlights that exist within my character too, within my subject, within the person that we have in our portrait. So keep that in mind. That's what you're affecting. The highlights and those shadows and anything in between or at the very extremes of each one. So what if I layer these up? Let's layer them. Ooh, that's a cool color right there. Doesn't that look super nice? So I can start saying, well, I like that one, but I also like, I don't know, one of my purple versions, right? So when I went here on red, I created a purple. Here it is. There's my purple. Do you see that? I'm going to go in here and say purple. And now I'm playing with color. Now I can create different variations. I can always come back to this purple. Let me show you how, right? So if I go here and continue to play all my channels and I add a little bit of blue and I kind of make it a bit sepia now it's a whole different vibe. That is a whole new color palette. And I'm going to do yet another version. And that's going to, let's give it a little bit of time to think. Computer, I know we're streaming. I know we're doing all the things. You're doing great, computer. Okay, so for this one, I might call it sepia, right? Sepia of my own kind because it's not entirely sepia, but I love how this is making those reds a little bit maroon. Super nice. I'm digging it. Okay, this is just using the curves, right? Okay, let's tune it a little bit more. Let's go into the green channels and add a little bit of green, add a little bit of purple. Sorry, we already did that one. Let's go into the reds, add a little bit of teal, a little bit of red. I mean, that's a whole nother vibe again. So maybe I do it the other way. I like it. I need to kind of mess with some of them. You can start to see the shadows being painted a green and teal, which is super cool to see, right? So watch how that happens. Let's remove that. Oops. Let's remove this one here. Okay, just stay there then, I guess. So if I do here, oh, double click this. That's how you remove it. There you go. Okay, so if you go here and match them all to a similar S curve, do you see how this one's similar, and this one slightly similar? They start to layer really well together, and you can start painting those shadows whatever color you want. So when I come back here, they all blend so beautifully, and you can increase that light. So this one might be my teal grungy color. I don't know. Call out the ISO film camera, the film that looks like this, and on the chat or on the comment section, and I'll definitely go buy that film and shoot that film. So let me know on the comment section, what film does this remind you of? So I'm gonna call it teal for now until I hear otherwise. All right, so we got a teal one. We've got this really cool sepia happening. We've got this really cool purple. I mean, we've created all those, we've created all of those different iterations right here just by saving the faces of my workflow. And they're very distinct. Take a look at the shadows and the way they're being tinted, right? Really cool looks to play around with in your scenes. Now, I can get a little crazy here and explore even further. Sometimes I love pushing these areas even further. So if I go here and what if I try something that isn't an S curve, right? What if I try something really opposite of what I expect and I imitate them all? Just as a rule of thumb, like if you keep one part of the phase of the process, but you remove the rest, for example, I removed the variable of it's an S curve, but I'm still making them all the same curve, will I get something cool? This is an interesting desaturated look. Do you see what I mean? There's going to be a moment where you're going to have to draw and be like, you know, this kind of doesn't work. But these are the moments where I find myself experimenting and wondering, is it possible though? Like if I make two of these channels a strange little curve by pushing my shadows into an unexpected place, what will happen? I mean, I get it. There are some scenarios here where you're like, I wouldn't do that to my photo. I don't want to touch it. This is my photo. You know, I don't want it to go to these places. But I argue that these are the moments when I also want you to ask yourself, how far can I also push my photo? What are the potentials of this image? And which of these moments resonates most? Which of these color palettes resonates most with the moment that you were trying to accomplish? So for example, in this, instead of having a fully white scene, I've got myself a really cute purple hue. And so what I can do from here is I can copy this image and all of these wonderful edits that we've created. Copy edit settings, right? copy, edit settings, and go over to one of our images here, this one for example, and just hit paste. And just like that, that image has a similar quality. You can see now we have a new variable because we have the word nice and how that word looks in here. And I would argue that that wasn't my goal for this one. I love how it looks on the entirely white image, but for this one, it's not quite what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna hit F here to go back to my editing. Okay, so how can we change this scene? We can always paste it and it looks wonderful. I absolutely think this color here is super nice. But what's so cool about this versions here is that I can copy this face, the face where I corrected original to text spec to light. Like that's how far I had gone. This is just the foundation. I can copy that edit setting and I can go here and hit paste. And that is only correcting all of those elements that I did up until that part of my workflow. So now I can just jump right into the styling part because I copied and pasted that part and I don't have to redo it. So let's do that. This is my favorite one. This one is probably my favorite. I'm going to paste those edits. I think when we paste some of these edit settings, you can also paste it from down here, by the way. Let's see. I'm thinking here through this. I do want to correct some additional things. So when I go into the details, let's see, go back to optics. I noticed that this one has a little bit more vignetting here on the edges. So I want to correct that. I want to add more white. I'm also going to play with the distortion because this one feels a little bit different in the way that it was corrected. I had to manually correct the other one as well. So that's going to be important. There. And in fact, you know what? This cropping, I'm not entirely sure that this will be the final cropping for this one. I think if we hit X, we can find all of these. We can have the vertical and horizontal ratio. If you've hit the letter X. If you go into the cropping, okay, and you go down here, you can find different options, right? And this can help us guide the final resting place for our composition or our cropping. I kind of love the entire thing, but there are other opportunities for you to maybe put more attention to the cross points, right? So one of the cross points could be directly on her. If I want to try a different ratio like the golden spiral, then I can do something a little bit closer so the golden spiral lands in a place that I like. Sometimes doing things like this can be so pragmatic to your photo. It can take it a little bit further. It can take it from a place where it's just adequate to this photo is just the photo, right? So take a look at what that would look like if I did this. So there's just a lot of places I did, however, take into account this element here. I really thought about the composition. As you can tell, I had different opportunities for variety. And I chose to keep this composition as a very cool, extreme angular line in addition to all the lines that I'm seeing here. My distortion still looks funny. Maybe I put it there. Yeah, I think that looks way better. Okay, so I can't wait to play with color here. This is always a lot of fun. One of my favorite things to do is play with color that is in the spectrum of red and blue and yellows. I don't know. I tend to really love those color palettes. So let's play with this one because this one has the red and blues, and you can argue some yellows here in her skin color and also a little bit of the hair color as well. So let's bring that, accentuate some of those moments. So instead of just diving into the curves here, I'm going to jump into color and explore some of the other tools we have available here. So let's try checking in on our balance by doing a quick eyedropper. We can do it on white ideally, and you get this super mega neutral blue foundation to start working from. And then we can go in the color mixer. You remember we used the target adjustment tool earlier. Now we get to use it again, and we're going to target 3 different sections: the hue, the saturation, and the luminance. Okay, so we're gonna jump on the sky and start treating the color of the sky, and that's because we've selected the hue. So we're just exploring the hue of this space. So do you see here we've got hue, we've got saturation, we've got luminance. So as I explore the hue, we can end up in the spectrum all the way to the other side on purple, or we can end up on this blue within the hue spectrum of this color that we've selected in our image, right? So that's how that works. I love this space because it can transform your image altogether. I can go from here directly into a different hue and jump into the reds and try out a different hue of red. Maybe I want a kind of like a burnt orange color. Also in here, I feel like it can really benefit from some saturation and luminance. So let's dive into the saturation of the red and really increase that saturation to give it that much more power. And then in the luminance, this one does get washed out, the C and the E, with a bit of white there. So that's something that can be brought back, but we can increase the luminance here to increase that power of that hue. A little bit more saturated there. Looking good. Okay, so as I continue to explore my colors through hue, saturation, and luminance using the eyedropper tool, I also want to think about the spaces that have similar colors, like for example this. So I could look at this red and try to match it. But you do have to be aware at this point we're dealing with skin color as well. So that's going to be important in your editing process. So let's zoom out here. Sorry, I don't know why I do that every time I zoom in. Okay. I think I'm going to crop it in just a little bit to remove that extra vignetting that was happening on the edge. When you don't want it in the scene, just cut it out or retouch it. So I am doing color here, so it's a little bit tricky now to retouch it. I recommend retouching it beforehand, but I do love that we have a clear line of communication here in Photoshop, in Lightroom to Photoshop. So let's edit in Photoshop really quick. It will edit at whatever point you're in. So that's going to be important, because if you want to edit at a good point, I would say is before color. So basically the opposite of what I'm doing, but that's okay because sometimes it's okay. So I just want to remove this, you know, it's what I call obstructive texture that is not easily discernible, and it doesn't add anything to the storyline. If it was texture like the brick here, where like I actually intentionally love that brick, or shadow play that feels like part of the entire story, that makes sense to me. But otherwise, it's got to go. It is just clutter. So that is a great way to improve your photo. I used here the smart selection tools that Photoshop has that are actually powered by AI. So when they remove a tool, this one's taking a little while because I'm running a show and the whole works, but also it's a little bit more complex. Do you see that there? Because it's resting on so many different tricky areas, but it did do a good job at removing it, right? So this is one of my favorite tools. I love using it. Let me move this around so you can see. I absolutely love using this tool. This is the remove tool. If you don't find it, you're going to find it right here under edit toolbars. And when you go here under edit toolbar, you're going to find all of these different tools. So if at any point you don't have access to a tool, you're like, oh, my favorite creator is using a tool, but I don't have it. You can find it under this really cool box of goodies, essentially. And what's even better, you can reorganize them. So if I use the burn tool more often than the dodge tool, I can put it at the top of that folder. But you notice there when it went outside, it also means that I can put it outside of the folder category. So you don't have to press and hold and get access to it. It's right at the forefront. So that is how you can access the rest of those tools here. And the remove tool is AI powered. So it's super chill. Like it just knows how to replace those pixels that are in between. So if I wanted to correct something, it's going to just replace those tiles seamlessly without thinking about it. So what's even better here is that we're able to zoom out of this scene, and now we have a cleaner scenario. I think we want to remove this too. What do you think? Should we remove this as well? All right, I think I'm going to remove it and say hello to the chat while I remove it. Yeah, I'm going to remove this because again, some folks are, actually, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to press this remove after each stroke. I'm going to turn it off. What that's going to do is going to let me create a selection or a brush outline that I can still sort of fix. I can hold Alt and remove some areas if I need to. And so I have time before it does the entire run through of corrections, right? Like if I selected a little more than I had to, I can hold Alt or Option on a PC, and then it gives you that minus button. And so you can minus and erase those areas that didn't work for you. Or I can undo in this particular moment, but you know, you can erase like this. So I think I'm going to remove the shadow. Okay, no, I wanted to remove that too. Holding Alt, there you go. And pressing yes to remove that. And it kind of created an alternative shadow there, which is not my favorite. So what are we going to do? Because there are 3 ways to approach this. Oh, we've got Jeffrey Bosa from Peru. Wow, that's so cool. I'm so glad to have people from all over the place. We got Russia, we got Switzerland, we've got Peru. That's so awesome. I'm from Honduras and I'm also American, based here in Texas. So I'm happy to have my multifaceted crowd. I love that. So we have several options here. It didn't do the best job, which I'm disappointed a little bit because I went for my power tool, remove tool. I'll tell you that the next best thing here is going to have to be generative fill. So let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. So generative fill, not going to introduce anything in my statement. I'm just going to let it know that I want it to remove. So by hitting generate, it just knows I want to remove an element. And by the way, I'm using Photoshop here. We're in the Photoshop interface and voila, it did a way better job. So when folks are saying, I don't believe in AI being part of photography, all I can think about is what about those painful hours of selection, removing, blending things, or that painful realization that perhaps I didn't take, the photo correctly, and a little detail can really mess up my whole thing. That makes no sense. You want a clean photo. That is a happy place to be. What's nice about this is that I get 3 options each and every time. So you can see which option's going to be the best one. So I think that one's good. I'm going to actually merge them because I'm happy with that. I'm okay with that. What's going to happen is that now my digital image has content credentials engraved in the metadata. And what that does for us is it makes sure that people know the transparency of the fact that we used AI in this image. But it's still my image, right? It's still our image. Still was a moment where we photograph things. Still is just an evolution of the way that we photograph. And that is my point of view on things. There's such an interesting conversation on that I have so frequently. It's kind of hilarious because it can go in so many ways. So I'm going to hit save here. I'm going to show you something. This is a TIFF file, which means that we're going to be able to save, close it, head over to Lightroom, and we're going to be able to see it update. Do you see that? That was cool, right? Now, this file is updated and communicated directly with Photoshop's edits. So we can work from there. However, we still have our previous photo. The downfall of working from here, I will tell you quite honestly, is that now this photo can never go back to its original photo. It can never, because the original is this one. It created a new iteration with the edits. If you want to go back to this one, we can go back to neutral. This is our neutral, by the way. So that's why I recommend doing it before the color. In order of operations, you would be removing things first and foremost. And so I just want to give that advice out there. Don't do it this way, but definitely do it in a way that is non-destructive. Okay, that's my spiel on that. I'm going to continue here. I like this one as it stands. Do y'all like it? I really dig it. I just wonder also that at this point, am I working with a raw file? I don't know. So I'm working with a TIFF file. So it still has a lot of information. So I could arguably continue to color edit and not worry about the possibility that I'm working on a flat compressed image, because I don't want that. That will give me different results in my color fidelity. Do you follow? Things I think about, because I definitely want my workflow to benefit my image as much as possible and give me a lot of opportunities for control and things like that. So I love this photo. It's looking good so far. I'm going to jump into a new tool. So let's dive into color grading. We've got color grading here on Adobe Lightroom. And color grading, when it comes to exploring color grading, I often like to tell folks this is the part of your workflow where you get to just have fun. You can use this area for color correction. So if you have too much red, you might want to add green or blues and vice versa, but it's still very color focused. So think about that. We are in the color grading tool and we're going to start playing with our style a little bit further in our Lightroom process. So let's go. Okay, so in our color grading process, what I want to do here is I want to think, I'm going to go back to this. I want to think about the shadows and the midtones and how are they colored, whether they're colored at all. Sometimes they're not colored. So you can see here If we go investigating the shadows, we've got shadows right here that seem neutral to me, right? They have no color in them. But if I go into our color grading section right here, we have 3 different colors to play with. And we've got our shadows, and we've got our midtones and highlights. So if I wanted to paint the shadows, I would come to shadows, and I can see it's in fact neutral. It's all the way in that center. And what I want to do is take it from neutral to a color hue. So I'm going to move it over to this pink, and you can start to see how the image is also transforming before your eyes, right? The shadows are acquiring a color palette. Now, what's so cool is that then you can go and grab this little lever right here, the outer circle, and you can navigate the 360 wheel and find yourself so many different expressions of your image. You can find blues, which gives a kind of solemn and demure look, maybe a little bit more grungy on that green. Then we get to these teals, nostalgic. We get into the sepias, giving those nostalgic looks. Back to those blues. So it's your preference at this point. Be informed. Consider the options. Of course, the further in you go, the closer you will be to neutral. The further out, the closer you will be to something more monochromatic. So a color palette that is going to give you monochromatic results means it's playing pretty closely to just being almost 2 colors alone and nothing else. It's not entirely 2 colors, but it's a cool way to achieve that without giving up all of your hues. And I think that's looking super awesome. And on the chat, if you have a particular workflow that you currently use on Adobe Lightroom, let me know what tool you start with, because I definitely find myself spinning my workflow upside down and turning it inside out and finding new ways to try the same workflow, because I've edited over, I don't know how many images at this point, hundreds and hundreds of images. Gosh, my backups are gigantic. In my profession, it's often really encouraged to find the right workflow. But I also question whether there is one right workflow, right? There's so many ways to reinvent your workflow. So I'm curious to know, what workflow do you currently have? And I think our clue will be, where do you begin? That will be our clue. I definitely begin just about anywhere most times. But today we started on the technical level, which was interesting. Okay. So as we continue here, I am loving this palette. Oof, so much teal. But I want to bring back some of my red. I kind of like this palette here. If I liked it the way it was before, by the way, I can always come back here to original, right? So I like this blue. I might do blue. Let's see here if we can try something different. I'm going to jump into Photoshop and take this completely somewhere else in a little bit, just for experimental sake. But I want to try one more color, I think, before we head out. So if you have questions now is the time to drop them. Remember, folks, we're live. I am here live with you. So if it's morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are, that's awesome. We are sharing time together right now, and it's super, super cool. The internet, you know what I mean? The internet. So awesome. If you're not live with me, folks, remember that you can always join me or tune in and turn on that notification bell on the YouTube channel, on the YouTubes, you know what I mean? Because I love jumping in here whenever possible. So I want to share my workflow with you on YouTube. And this is ever evolving. It's so much fun. And I'm having a lot of fun creating these streams for you, for me to learn alongside you as well. So keep up with that. That is on YouTube, Cyn Lagos on Wednesdays. Check it out. Turn on the notification bell just in case I go live on a separate day like today. Okay. That said, folks, I'm going to try one more color and we're going to jump into Photoshop and we're going to call it a wrap. So let's do that. Let's jump on our color grading and do another experiment here. So in my color grading, another opportunity that you have with color grading is going to be, let me see, I'm going to go to this one here. All right. Another opportunity we have with color grading is going to be playing with the highlights and the midtones. So if I notice that I added too much blue, I can counter that with a little bit of the opposite color in the color wheel. So if it looks too monochromatic to you, it looks too much like a universal filter, then you can come over to the opposite side of the spectrum. And that's why this color wheel can be so essential, because you're having these opportunities to play with separate areas of your photograph. It's like you're really deconstructing the areas which you are changing the value of. And right now I'm playing with the midtones and I'm adding just a tad bit of a red hue so I can create a different look of my scene. Right? And I really hope you're able to discern that information, because those little details, when they pile up, it really makes a difference. If I was to go in the highlights here and also add a bit of that color, remember earlier when I was telling you, hey, remember how we can potentially introduce a little bit of that nostalgic element into your images by adding color to your highlights? Remember how I said embrace those imperfections that come out of cameras? One of the imperfections was how in film, highlights tended to be a different color. And you can introduce that historical element by adding those highlights in a different hue here in the color grading tool. And just like before, I would navigate the 360 wheel and see what options work for me. I'm going to be a little bit subtle on this one. I think I'm going to bring it in just about there. And that starts to give this a little bit more of a old school look versus the first version that we had. Here's the original. Here's the more old blue one. And here's the balance between the two. Let's call this one balance for that sake. That's awesome. All right, folks. So I'm going to jump into Photoshop now. So as we jump into Photoshop, I want you to keep in mind a couple things. In Photoshop, everything that we play with has a little bit to do and has a very strong connection with photography. So rasterized images are a big component of how we navigate through Photoshop, right? Maybe you found yourself in Photoshop using different tools. Maybe you have explored photography in Photoshop. This is the perfect native place to experiment with your image directly from Lightroom. So let's go jump from Lightroom into Photoshop and dive in. Okay, so just like we did before, I'm going to be taking one of these photos into Photoshop, and I want one that is closest to neutral. So I might take my original from this one and hit edit in Photoshop, or shift command T, command E. E is an elephant, not T as in tiger. Okay, so now that we're here, you're gonna find two things that are gonna be important in our Photoshop workflow. So now we're in Photoshop, okay? So here I want to explore different ways that this can have color without me editing the raw footage, but rather layering on different effects. So there's opportunity here to just leave this photo as is, but I always love exploring this facet just to see what is possible. Okay, so we're gonna make a copy, of course, because we don't want to mess our original file. So I'm gonna create that copy there and go into this little button right here, which gives us a bunch of adjustment layers. We have in here, we're going to find the gradient map. So it looks like that. In the gradient map, you're going to find a gradient. So what's cool about this gradients, if we go exploring the gradient editor, we're going to find so many cool things in here. There's already an entire plethora of gradients that you can try out and place on top of your images. So these are going to be sort of like this extreme way to adapt color into your images, but it is an experimental facet that I welcome you to explore, really, because it could be really interesting. Once you do something like this, just take note of where the colors lie. So this is for sure my midtone. This is my shadows. So you can see the shadows are inverted here. These are my highlights, right? So I might want to then click reverse. So this looks a little bit more natural on my image. Okay, that's looking a lot better there. And then we can go into one of my favorite things, which is going to be the adjustment tools. So in the adjustment tool, my brain there, it's going to be the color modes, right? So in here, we're going to be able to navigate through the different ways that the image and the gradient blend together. Like that looks like an interesting, similar result to some of the purple hues and executions that we did in Adobe Lightroom, right? You can see that in the color palette. So if I went into other spaces, like down here, this subsection, you can really go somewhere completely out of bounds, right? Now you're coloring directly outside the line. For example, if you use difference, anything that has a basically it acts as the opposing color of what is in your image. So all the reds turned purple in this case. And if I was to change that gradient to something else, maybe blue, you can get an effect like this. And there's just so many different approaches to this. Of course, some of these will look more natural than others. This is, again, folks, experimental. And I just want you to know that there's a lot of opportunities for you to try out color correction, color styling in a creative way that isn't totally bound by rules and regulations. Because when it comes to color, honestly, there's so many ways that your photo can go. So it can go from this to this, right? Like that is super cool. And because it's an adjustment layer, it's not going to mess with your original file, right? So I can do this color. Let's do another color here. Let's try out a separate gradient. So if I bring these tools with me here and do a different gradient, again, it's on color mode hue, and I want a different gradient here. So we're gonna go into this. Ooh, panels on panels on panels. Okay, so follow me here. I'm on this panel, and maybe I can try something iridescent. Ooh, iridescent sounds super cool. So, and it gives us something like that. Okay, so all right, let's move this around so you can see. If I try something more grays can give us options for black and white outputs, right? Oof, look at this. That is so epic. There's something so intriguing about that. And so if I was to create a poster design or something like that, this could be a perfect fit for me. Now, mind you, we have it in hue. If we change this to something else, I can create so many different iterations. So let's remove this from here, right? I can create so many different iterations. This may look a little bit more complicated for y'all, but once we, let's move this back around. Once we lower the fill a little bit and double click this, we're gonna go into the layer styles. And under here, we're gonna say, if red, blend a little bit differently. See how it's blending there, right? If red, I want it to blend differently. If blue, let's see how much impact I make on the blue. There's just so many different options here to try. Let's see this one. Ooh, soft light looks absolutely beautiful. So there's so many different ways to kind of mitigate the look. If I undo this, actually, I wanted to go back to this. That's what I want to do. So if I wanted to lower this opacity, that's fine. If I want to just introduce those colors kind of subtly, but I also have a mask in here, which means, hi, we've got some new folks here. We got Barca. Hi, Barca. What's up? We're about to wrap up, but if you're just joining us, remember you can see this entire stream, restream it on my YouTube channel. Just restream it. I restream so many things that I don't catch up with, and it does pay off, folks. So if not, catch us on the next live stream. There will be more live streams on Wednesdays and in here on YouTube, and on Mondays on Motion Mondays with Adobe Live, which is really cool. All right, so still happy you're here on the chat. So thank you for joining us. All right, so I'm going to add something to this mask. So remember here, we've got a mask, right? So we can do something with this. We've got a color palette here that is due to this adjustment layer, and we have a mask. I don't like the way the purple lands on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask, a gradient that is black and white into that mask so that it doesn't impact this area. So do you see what I did there? That is in the mask, nowhere else but the mask. So this area is still being impacted by this really cool gradient that I just added in, which gives her some cool purplish looks all around, so that you can see how this happens. I'm going to put this aside for a sec, and you can see that the only affected area is going to be here. And I'll show you that by moving these modes here. See, now we're only affecting this subsection. Masks are going to save you. It's one of the best things you can incorporate in your workflow. I really like how this works. I think I'm going to blend it a little bit smaller, like a little bit like there. Well, I was at 45 already. So I like this iteration. I think that looks super cool. Let's continue to experiment here and see what other variations we can try. I also have, this is going to be my last pro tip of the day. So I want to sometimes just bring in a raw file. So I'm going to save this one for myself and press OK. Yes, I know it's going to have more weight, but I want these layers to still be live layers in case I want to change it. So once I've saved it, I can see that iteration here. Do you see this? Super cool. We've got that purple thing going on. Really nice. And if I want to edit an original, for example, I want to edit this one here. And I want to edit it in Photoshop. Let's go back to, this is Lightroom, by the way. So I want to edit in Photoshop. I'm going to do something like this. And what I mean by edit is in this process, I want to show you how I edit using just Photoshop and a very simple tool that tends to be hidden, but you can bring in your raw files and convert them pretty quickly to some really iconic filters. So check it out. So I have here an original file. So I think what I'm going to do here is double click that, create a duplicate, and go into this little button right here. And what I want to do is drop in. It's a little bit hidden. Most people don't know about it, but it's right here. It's called a color lookup, right? It's so hidden. It's all the way at the bottom, right? That's really funny. So we've got a color lookup right there. So we're going to click it. And what that's going to prompt is this properties panel. So we're in the properties panel here, and we're going to see all of these options. Look how cool. We've got all of these options. Do these look familiar? We got Fuji. We've got foggy. Okay, I don't know that, but we got some horror blue. We've got Kodak. What's so peculiar about these is that they are cube files. So they're essentially these like not 360, but they're three-dimensional files that are going to wrap themselves around your image in a different way than a simple filter would. So this is super cool. I want to try one of these, and I'm going to try this one. And let's see what it looks like. Wowza. I mean, does she look like a baddie or what? This looks so awesome. By just changing that to a Fuji Real 500D Kodak 2393 by Adobe, of course. And then we've got Futuristic Bleak. Whoa, totally different. Very hidden feature. And look at the potential of changing your scene to something completely new, even down to the creative aspect, that some of which we've explored today on our live stream on Medium Unlimited. So I hope you found this absolutely thrilling and exciting. Folks, I absolutely love jumping on this and showing you some of my tools of the trade, the different ways that I like to explore my own workflow so that I don't remain in these spaces where I don't develop my stylistic taste for my own photography. If you love post editing, give this video a like, right? If you love post editing, then join me next Wednesday as we explore more editing zones, some more of these wonderful portraitures. And we're going to take a last look here at our work as we say goodbye. So we created this image, which we can now save. And it's going to propagate here on Lightroom. So we created this wonderful color edit here in Photoshop using LUTs, right? We explored different techniques and workflows using versions here, exploring different ways that we can do our workflow, our order of operations, and try to find room for experimentation. That's what we did here, folks. And I hope this has inspired you to explore some post editing and some of the photos that exist in your SD cards right now, or maybe you can scan some of your film photos as well. So these are absolutely awesome. I had a lot of fun. Working with y'all. So thank you so much for joining me today here on the chat. Again, my name is Cyn Lagos. I love exploring and educating folks on the space of art, design, and video. So hope to see you here next time again soon. See you on the other side.